Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to make these floating shelves with this awesome waterfall mitered edge detail. And I'm also going to show you how to make the brackets and install them. Now let's get started. So I picked up some 3/4 inch walnut for this project because these shelves will be installed right next to the media console I just built a couple videos ago, which also has a walnut top. I began by cutting these boards to rough length at the miter saw. I'm making a set of 4 shelves and they'll be 5 inches by 5 inches by 4 feet long. Now back at the table saw, I need to rip down the boards that will make up the front face of the shelves as well as the top and bottom faces. These boards came surfaced flat on 2 sides and had one edge ripped straight, which means no joiner or planer needed. I cut out as much sapwood, wane, and defects as I could. Some defects were unavoidable, but I can deal with those later in the build. Now at this point the shop was smelling super nice. Walnut has this very distinct smell when you work it, and it always makes me happy. Then I went ahead and trimmed everything to final length before moving on to cutting the joinery. Now I decided to use tongue and groove joinery for these shelves, and the first thing I need to do was cut a 1/4 inch rabbet down each side of the boards that would become the top and bottom of the shelves. I threw my dado stack in the table saw to make these cuts in one pass. I just set my fence so it was almost touching the blade, and then I could use the fence to reference off of. Then I grabbed my miter gauge and continued the rabbets onto the 2 short sides so that I end up with 3 edges that I could fit into the grooves. After I cut all the rabbets for the top and the bottom faces, I just need to cut the matching grooves in the front face of the shelves. Now to do this, I cut a groove along one edge and then flip the board around and make a matching groove along the other edge. Now how this joint's going to work is that this will make the top and bottom of each shelf sit inside the groove but still sit flush with the outside edge. Next I marked the center of each board and lined them up in the grooves. And I had some slight bow in the material, so some of them were a bit feisty when I tried to put them in the grooves, but it didn't take too much persuasion. And doing this dry fit allows me to mark where the edge of the top and the bottom will be so that I can cut the miters in the right place. This is the most nerve-wracking part of the build in my opinion. I always try to make sure that I cut my miters a little long and then nibble away at them until they are exactly the right length, because you can always take material off, but you can't put it back on if you cut them too short. Now once I line everything back up in the grooves and check the fit, I can take the 2 offcuts and place them miter side up on my sled and cut a miter going in the opposite way. If you line it up so the blade cuts right at the edge of the first miter, then you'll achieve that nice waterfall look. Then I checked the fit of each end to see how the miters turned out. Luckily I got a tight fit and a nice looking miter. I went ahead and did a dry fit of each shelf before the glue ups just to make sure that I wouldn't hit any snags. Assembly of these was pretty easy. I just added a bead of glue to each groove and then added some glue on the miter joint. I set the top and bottom in the grooves, sometimes a little forcefully. I then added the 2 ends and lined up the miters as best I could before adding the clamps. I first work on clamping the 2 ends before going back and adding clamping pressure to make sure that the top and bottom seat fully and flush with the front edge. And I just repeated that process for all 4 shelves and then waited for the glue to dry. Once out of the clamps, my first focus is cleaning up the miters. The dry glue always gets in the way of being able to see the joint clearly, and I want to know how tight these miters turned out. A few passes with 120 grit sandpaper will clean up all the mill marks from the faces and take care of any dry glue stains. Next, I went over the top and bottom edges with a hand plane to get them flush with the surface. And after some hand planing fun, I can move on to dealing with any defects that were remaining, like this opening around the knot. I'm going to fill this with CA glue that's tinted black, and so I masked off the bottom and side with tape to prevent drips. I add a spritz of activator and then proceed to fill the knot. Then I give it a second spritz of activator to help the cure time. Once dried, I can knock it back with 120 grit sandpaper and my defect is filled and flush. And one thing I need to do before I move on to final sanding is clip off the excess from the ends to make them flush with the back using the table saw. I hit each shelf with 150 grit sandpaper, and I need to stop there because I'll be finishing this with Rubio Monocoat Pure, and you really can't go past 150 grit when you're using that as a finish. Now here's another look at those sexy waterfall miters. Yummy. Now before I moved on to final finishing, I wanted to go ahead and cut the brackets that will mount these to the wall. Each one is made from a 2x4 cut to length with 3 shelf supports screwed into place. And you can see here how each support will nest into the shelf where it will be screwed into place once I install them. Okay, now to finish these off, I just wanted to break the edges with a block plane, not really to create a chamfer, just enough so that the edges wouldn't cut me and to remove any rough spots. Now notice that I didn't touch the waterfall edges because I wanted those to stay crisp for the full waterfall effect. Then I wiped down each shelf with a microfiber cloth to remove any dust or debris before applying the finish. And for these shelves, I'm going to be using Rubio Monocoat, which is an oil wax finish that is super easy to apply. It comes in 2 parts that need to be mixed together in a 3-to-1 ratio, and it doesn't take very much at all to finish these shelves. To apply it, I'm just using a white applicator pad similar to a Scotch-Brite pad. I just load the pad up with a little finish and work it into the wood going with the grain. I take it section by section, making sure to cover everything thoroughly. And after about 5 minutes, I wipe off the excess oil. You really want to make sure that all of the excess is removed. Okay, now on to installation. After locating the 3 studs in the wall, I install the first bracket using 3.5-inch screws with washers. I then level the bracket and install the second and third screws. Next, I slide the floating shelf onto the bracket and drill 2 pilot holes into the bracket where I will be putting 2 screws to hold the shelf in place. Now for the top shelf, I'm putting these screws on the top because they won't be visible from the ground. And then with the help of my trusty laser level, I measure 12 inches down at each stud location to mark the location of the next bracket. And I just repeated that process over again. Fasten and level the bracket to the studs, slip on the shelf, and check for level again before fastening the shelves to the bracket. Okay guys, that is it. It really is that easy. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video and learned something, and if you did, please leave me a thumbs up below and leave me a comment to let me know your thoughts. I would also love for you to hit that logo icon and become a subscriber. I would really like to have you on board. And also hit that bell icon to be notified of future videos. Speaking of future videos, I've got a couple other ones that I think you guys would really enjoy, so go ahead and check those out while you're at it. And until next time, have fun in the shop.